Smart speakers, Lindsay Broadhead, Jamie Ellerton, Shane Hewitt, and the night shift. Before we took the break, we were talking about the parties being organized or disorganized. Lindsay had said that she found the Conservatives to be quite organized leading up to the election, all the things. And with the budget, all these bits and pieces lately, it seems like the Liberals have taken the organization championship, planned a floor crossing, released it the same day, distracted from a budget, and have really carried the conversation since. Jamie, your thoughts?
Yeah, the timing of it, I think, couldn't have been better for Mark Carney and his Liberals. I do think you're right to say that the Conservatives are caught flat-footed, and I think they've made a strategic mistake this past week by continuing to just have a vitriolic response in response to crisscrossing the floor, and fed way more oxygen to the point that here we are still talking about it over a week later. I think when you look at what's going on right now, there's the kind of the old adage in politics that winning solves everything. And the blunt reality is the Conservatives lost the last election. And I think they're still trying to create a new normal and figure out what their footing is going forward. They're going to continue to talk about affordability issues. That's what Pierre Poilievre kind of puts front and center in the window when he gets to proactively communicate on something. But in terms of kind of like turning the page, holding this government to account, and kind of finding something to prosecute on a day-to-day basis that he did quite effectively with Justin Trudeau, I think they're still searching for that. And there is definitely you do get the sense that the Conservative Party's operations right now is not a well-oiled machine.
Then help me understand this part, because I've always looked at it this way. When the "oh yeah, well" starts to happen in politics, that usually means somebody has like taken a hit, right? And so in this case, there's the floor crossing, yeah, well, and then there's the "I quit" in Edmonton. And then now it's like, oh, yeah, well, you think our party's in disarray. Your party's in disarray because they're not talking about they're fighting over the Enviro file. They're fighting. Oh, yeah, well, they're fighting over. And so and in the talking heads, whether they are paid to do it or whether they just fancy themselves to be a voice of the parties, Jamie, that has really ramped up in the last few days. Well, oh, yeah, they're in disarray. We're not in disarray. You're in disarray. My dad could beat up your dad.
Yeah, and I think if you look at where Canadians essentially spoke in the last election, they fundamentally trusted Mark Carney on matters of leadership and kind of like the serious needs to grapple with the times. And so for Pierre Poilievre, I think you need to be a little bit more choosy in picking and choosing your battles. Like, yes, it sucks in the very technical term, what you would describe when someone crosses the floor and leaves you. But by spending a week feeding fuel into the fire and the rage that you're seeing in response, and like the series of like competing leaks as you just described, Brian Lilly had a kind of a TikTok style blow by blow of how Chris came to cross the floor. All this is doing is keeping that on the reality that a Conservative has crossed the floor to join the Liberals. And when they do then talk about it, they talk about the Liberal budget and kind of what Prime Minister Carney wants to do. And so I don't think it's helping. I think it would be far more valuable for the Conservatives to kind of just have a bit of like bite your tongue and quickly pivot back to a stronger message, which is talking about the shortcomings of this budget, whether that's the size of the deficit, whether or not you believe Mark Carney, still effectively running with Justin Trudeau's team, has the ability to deliver, and the fact that there's very little in the window that addresses affordability for Canadians today. This is a tectonic plates of kind of macroeconomic focused budget, and there's a lot of Canadians suffering right now. And I think Pierre Poilievre better spent his time, and those around him better spending his time talking about that than continuing to rail against a floor crosser who's already left.
It's interesting to me because they've essentially leaked what the major projects releases are going to be, and there's nothing in there for Alberta when it comes to oil. There's good projects in there, but there's nothing that serves that part. And yet, I don't know, it seems like this slow maneuver. It's canaptus.com to connect with Jamie Ellerton. Lindsay Broadhead is broadheadcoms.ca. In the communications angle, Lindsay, how do you mitigate this? Do you distract away from it, or do you, because like Jamie said, I feel like they're just throwing more fuel on the fire.
Jean Chrétien spoke last week in Toronto, and Lisa Laflamme granted him an hours-long interview, and so it was this hour of quotes because Chrétien is a quote machine. And at one point, he was talking about people quitting when he was in leadership, and I don't know if he was talking about crossing the floor exactly, but he said something to the effect of when someone gave him a resignation letter, he said, "Thank you," and that was it. Right? Like, goodbye. He didn't read the letter. He didn't acknowledge the letter. The point is, if someone's going to leave, onward. And I think that is such a remarkable insight. The Conservative Party had any number of communications responses they could have used. They could have said, you know what, we're strengthening our party. If there's people who are undecided, that is okay. We wish them well. They could have taken the they go low, we go high route, and won, because it is such an emotional thing when people cross. But instead, they just added fuel to their own fire, and burn, baby, burn they have. And so it's bizarre to me, because again, this party's full of communications, well-trained communications people, smart people, and they're not following the basics. So there is more at play, and they've, to your points earlier, they've changed the media cycle. They needn't had to, though, at all.
Yeah. Well, it's almost like, I'm assuming a lot when I say this, but it's almost like I think we discovered why the Liberals were not prepared to talk about the budget, because they were very prepared to talk about other things. And that seems to be the case. Jamie, how much of this bakes in the background? Like this wolf in sheep's clothing, sneaky pool, floor crossing threats, leverage. I'm finding it to be more and more closely related to the Power Book series of politicking than I am to what I understand politics to be. Is this stuff always going on in the background?
I don't think it's anywhere near as dramatized as people are putting it out to be. I think, given the nature of how small Mark Carney's gap is from minority to majority government, this is probably getting a bit more fuel than most. And there were undeniably a lot of Conservatives who had a lot of high hopes going into the last election, who feel that the party should have won, and are still waiting for that postmortem to account for what went wrong and how they're going to do better next time. And there's a bit of dissatisfaction there. And so there's always in Ottawa kind of two message tracks. There's the line that they say to media that we're all united, everything's great, and all parties do it all the time. And then there's what they say over beers or in the hallways of the House of Commons, which tends to include a lot more griping. Where it gets interesting from a public conversation standpoint is when those hallway conversations and griping over beers conversations becomes front page news, and it kind of pulls back the curtain a bit.
So, Lindsay, how do they turn this around? I mean, you can comment on the griping and the backroom deals if you like, but how do they turn this around?
They have to think brand first, right? The genius of where they were before, and it was that they were just, I keep using the word tight, they were a sports team, right? They were in sync. People knew what they stood for. There was research that came out today, I think it was Abacus, but I hope I'm not misquoting who did the research, but that support from Conservatives for Poilievre is higher than it's ever been, right? So it's that isn't something that they should let go. That's huge. And there's opportunity to fall in line, stay in sync, and let this drop, but also start to echo one another, start to sound like a team, sound like a party, and have laser focus on whatever their next goals are. Because right now they're just out of sync. So get in line, and they can recover. As think of the Liberal Party not too long ago. Change happens super quick.
Yeah. Well, when everyone's willing to participate, anyway, but super quick. It does create the notion that it's possible that Canadians voted for a guy that, maybe we'll save this for our next conversation, but voted for a guy that crossed the floor, or did they vote for the party that he crossed the floor? And these things could change the political dynamic because it is so close in seats that the guy you voted for just was the one that gave the party to the power to the other party, and without an election. And I find all that stuff still so bothersome. I guess I've just got so much to learn with all of this. Lindsay Broadhead, Broadhead Comms, and Canaptus with Jamie Ellerton. Smart speakers. Go put up your Christmas lights already. Bah humbug, you two. Thanks for being here.